started now. Hi, everyone. It's Stephanie with the patient story, and I am so excited to be able to introduce our guest today, Justine Lubke, who has graciously offered to share her story with us. And Justine, I know you have quite a story and a lot to get through. I just wanted to thank you for spending the time with us today.
Yeah, you betcha.
And wanted to ask, we are so much more than our cancers, and so I like to ask people to just sort of introduce themselves outside of the cancer context. Who's Justine?
I am a kindergarten teacher and I have been teaching for 9 years. So that's my true passion. And I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing about me is that I'm a teacher and I love working with kids.
Love it. And I know we'll be able to show a picture too of two beautiful young girls. You said you've nannied since they were little babies, so it's clear that you have a passion for little kids. So thank you for sharing that. um, let's just dive right in because I know your story's quite extensive. um, how did you know something was wrong? What were those first symptoms for you?
Yeah, so the summer of 2018, I started noticing that I had an increase in bowel movements. And it just slowly got worse and worse, to the point where I was going up to 20 times a day. And so, January of 2019, I kind of finally said, enough is enough. I need to figure out what's going on. Um, so I went to my doctor and we just decided to do blood tests and a colonoscopy to kind of get to the bottom of it.
Can you describe the colonoscopy for people who haven't undergone one?
Yeah, so colonoscopy, you do a prep before, and you start like 5 o'clock the night before. You don't get to eat anything all day. You start this prep drinking this stuff. It flushes out your system. You wake up the next morning, drink a little more, flushes you out the rest of the way. And then you just check into the hospital for it's just an inpatient procedure. You're sedated, so you don't know what's happening, and they just can go in and look inside your bowels.
Okay.
And I guess I should add that part of some of my other symptoms were a little bit of blood in my stool and pretty soft stool, um, which wasn't really that normal for me. So.
Okay. It sounds like you were really attentive. You knew this was not normal for your body, so that's why you got it all checked out. When did you find out from the doctor that something was wrong? And can you recall that moment for us?
Yeah. I went in for my colonoscopy on February 11th. And, when I went in for it, I was actually really worried that they were just going to say, we didn't find anything. We don't know what's going on. Um, cancer never crossed my mind. Other things like Crohn's had crossed my mind, ulcerative colitis, but not cancer. So I woke up from my colonoscopy, and my boyfriend at the time was there with me. And the doctor came out and um, told me he had found a tumor. And uh, my world basically came crashing down. That was not the news I expected to receive at all. He was, they hadn't even done the biopsy, but he said, I've seen this many times before, and there's not a doubt in my mind that it is cancer. Um, so from there, everything was fast tracked. I went straight in for some blood work, and everything just went really fast from there.
Right. It's a whirlwind from that moment because then you're thrust into now you have to do X, Y, Z. So I guess the question is, did you have a moment to process what you had just been told?
That's a good question. I don't think that I ever really did. I went from you have a tumor to calling my parents and letting them know what they had just found. Um, yeah, so I don't know if I ever really did get to process it.
You mentioned telling your parents. A lot of people struggle with this too, in terms of how do I break the news? You don't get to really process it. Then you have to consider sharing this diagnosis, and you don't even have all the answers yet. But is that when you decided to start telling people, or how did you handle that?
I started with telling my parents because I am extremely close with them. So they knew I was going in for the colonoscopy. They knew I'd been struggling with my problems. So that was an instant for me to call my parents. Um, and then from there, it took a little while to tell other people.
Do you have any guidance for other people on how to handle something like that?
I mean, I think you just have to do what you're ready for. You can't worry about hurting anybody's feelings that you don't tell right away.
Right.
It's not their journey, it's
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
And you just have to do it when it's right. I had a friend ask to do a GoFundMe, which is really how my news got out. And I was kind of okay with that because it took it out of it being in my hands to let people know, and they just found out through that. Um, which for me, that worked, and
It
that
does.
was
Yeah.
good.
It takes one thing off your plate that's suddenly very crowded, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm glad you had that support. And also, Justine, you mentioned that you did egg retrieval research almost right away. I mean, amidst all the first sort of appointments, was it you who first thought of that? And sort of take us through, um, yeah, what you were researching and what was going on through your mind.
Yeah, I did not think of it. It was my mom who kind of brought it up that there was probably going to be a possibility of that um, treatment causing issues for me. So I started looking into it after she brought it up, talked to my radiation doctor, who really radiation is kind of what was going to initially ruin having kids. I wasn't going to hold a carry a pregnancy, and then I was going to become infertile, which also chemo caused that. So I looked into it a little bit. It was going to take time. The odds weren't the greatest, and it was a lot of money that I don't have. So ultimately, I decided to forego going through with it, um, just for
Mm.
those reasons. And I also wanted to be able to be around to possibly have kids, and postponing treatment wasn't wasn't the best idea, considering I was staged at a 3B, so I was already pretty far along.
Right, that was my next question to you. First of all, thanks for sharing that because
Yeah.
there's so many hurdles in terms of navigating quality of life. Sometimes people don't even know to research fertility preservation, and like you, some people it's not even an option because time is a factor,
Mhm.
and financial, toxicity. So I appreciate you sharing that. Um, that was my next question. You were staged at 3B. When did you get that whole diagnosis? What did the doctor tell you about it? And how did he or she describe the treatment plan for you?
Well, I met with a couple. I had my surgeon who I met with, and the radiation doctor, and then chemo. So I had like three doctors I was kind of working with, and I actually can't even remember. I feel like I was staged from my surgeon by looking at my tumor, but I'm actually having a hard time recalling exactly which of my doctors kind of staged me. Um, but they staged it at 3B. And so, they said, this is the protocol for this kind of for rectal cancer. You're going to you start with 5 weeks of chemo and radiation. You can do your chemo by pill, which for me, I was still really active. So that was what was perfect for me. And did the radiation. They said you'd have a small break, you'd go through a surgery, remove the tumor, have a temporary ileostomy, and then finish up with cleanup chemo.
Okay, so that was the overall plan. And you had
Yep.
you had, of course, an entire medical team because there were so many different parts to this treatment.
Yeah.
So you had the start of all this was really February 11th or so, you said, and it was March 4th when you started the 5.5 weeks of this oral chemo pill, as well as radiation 5 times a week. Let's start with the chemo pill. Do you remember what it was called and how often you had to take it, and if you could talk about the side effects?
Yeah, I don't actually remember what it was called, but I had to take it 5 days a week for 5 weeks. So I got the weekends off. I really had not a lot of side effects, and I did really well. I was going to the gym every day through that first 5 weeks of treatment, and continued my active lifestyle,
Yeah.
um, and
Actually,
teaching in the classroom as well.
okay, so it was pretty, life was less interrupted, which is good. I did jump the gun a little bit. I'm gonna
Mhm.
hold off on talking about the rest of treatment for our next
Okay.
segment. As we wrap up this first part, which is, this is the whirlwind part. You're waiting for answers. You finally hear the word cancer for the first time. I mean, had you even heard of rectal cancer before? How did you, when you finally had a little bit more time for this to sink in, how were you able to move through processing what you were going through? Or do you feel like even at this point, even after some more weeks, you still weren't able to process it?
No, I was. I mean, I hadn't heard of rectal cancer. I did not know a lot about it. Um, I was just, I mean, it was just like a whole new world opened up to me, and not a world I ever wanted to enter. But what was your other question? Sorry.
No, no, not at all. I mean, you're 30 years old, right? At the time of
Yeah.
diagnosis. I mean, this is not anything any healthy 30-year-old is even thinking about.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any, I guess, maybe guidance for other people who are in this stage right now where they've just found out they've been diagnosed with rectal cancer, um, how to get through maybe the testing and the waiting for answers and how to head into going into treatment?
Yeah. For me, I made a, I told myself early on I was going to make a positive out of a negative situation. Um, and that was just being really open about my story, sharing so that hopefully, number one, anybody going through a tough time can be inspired, but also, um, anybody going through cancer. Um, and just, yeah, kind of staying positive, I guess keeping to my normal schedule was helpful to me. um I I still wanted to continue teaching and being there for my students,
Right.
and um that was kind of how I handled what I went through.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Did you, by the way, have any, my last question for this portion of our conversation is, did you consider second opinions, or was it, we have to move on this and you liked the doctors you had?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely looked at other hospitals, but from the that was more later on in my treatment.
Okay.
In the beginning, I trusted where I was at. I trusted the doctors that I had. You know, there was a lot of research behind rectal cancer and the treatment plan, so I trusted the treatment plan. I felt really great about my surgeon. He had just come from another area and came very well. He was
Experience.
very highly
Mm.
recommended, and experienced. So I felt really good about where I was at and all my treatment. All my doctors were amazing. Um, so I felt really good about it.
Okay.
I think if it would have been a little bit more of a confusing cancer where there wasn't as much research, maybe I would have, but it was supposed to be a pretty straightforward process.
Okay. And it sounds like you had good rapport and relationship with the doctors you met. So you decided to go on that track. So I'm glad to hear that. So we're
Yeah.
going to stop this segment and we're going to move on to the next clip where
Okay.
we talk about Justine's treatment. And I know it's been a long road, so we'll
Yeah.
get to it. Thank you.